marijuana agenda. Like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, May 22nd, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Greetings from the north of Alaska. We are in Anchorage right now, coming to you live following my appearance at the Cannabis Classic that took place this weekend. Coming up in hour two, we've got a very special live hour two for you, where we've got winners and presenters from the Cannabis Classic Awards right here in Anchorage. They'll be joining us right here in this studio to talk all about this weekend's festivities. But also coming up on today's show, we've got some video from this weekend's festivities. My buddy Jonah Tacoma from Dab Stars led an epic 420 celebration. We'll get to that at the bottom of this hour. But coming up on this hour as well, we've got our cannabis headline news. We've got all sorts of federal bill updates to get to. Also, we've got our Cannabis Medicine Today segment, where we'll hear from Karen Hendrickson. She's with Alaska's Division of Environmental Health. She presented at the Cannabis Classic on the use of pesticides on cannabis crops. Also coming up on the show, the Northeast Cannabis Chronicles. We'll get an update on what's happening in Vermont from Eli Harrington with Heady Vermont and Vermontawana, and we'll end things up with the Radical Rant, where real people are getting busted for this allegedly legal in all 50 states CBD oil. That's all coming up. The news is next. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's TheSilverTour.org. Supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor-intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from the silvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
The marijuana agenda, like the conservative agenda, minus the hypocrisy.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me for A Sensible Future from Students for Sensible Drug Policy every other Tuesday here on the Marijuana Agenda. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Monday, May 22nd, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. In federal news, Tom Angel reports that on Friday, the Trump administration relaunched the Office of National Drug Control Policy's website, which had been offline since the inauguration. It includes information about the high-intensity drug trafficking areas and drug-free communities programs, suggesting that cuts floated earlier may not happen. Also this week on Capitol Hill, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions will testify about the Justice Department's budget request before the relevant House and Senate appropriations subcommittees on Wednesday and Thursday, respectively. The appearances could be good opportunities for supportive members of Congress to press him about marijuana policy. Federal legislation to aid the burgeoning cannabis industry continues to pick up support in Congress. In the House, the bill to increase marijuana businesses' access to banks got 3 new co-sponsors, bringing the total to 35. The bill to create a federal tax structure for legal marijuana got 2 new co-sponsors, bringing the total to 5. The bill to undo the 280E tax penalty on marijuana businesses got 2 new co-sponsors, bringing the total to 14. The bill to let military veterans get medical cannabis recommendations from Departments of Veterans Affairs doctors got 3 new co-sponsors, bringing the total to 11. The bill to narrow the gap between state and federal marijuana policies got 2 new co-sponsors, bringing the total to 5. And the bill to repeal a law threatening loss of federal funding for states that don't suspend driver's licenses from people with drug convictions got 4 new co-sponsors, bringing the total to 9. Republican Governor Phil Scott is expected to decide soon whether he will allow the state to become the first in the country to legalize marijuana by legislative act rather than by a citizen referendum. Scott says he's not philosophically opposed to marijuana legalization, but he has concerns about keeping it away from children. He could choose to sign the bill, let it become law without his signature, or veto it. He must decide by Wednesday. Under the legislation, small amounts of marijuana would be legal to possess and grow for anyone over age 21. Larger amounts would remain illegal. A commission would develop a proposal to tax and regulate marijuana that would be ready for the legislature to consider next year ahead of the implementation date. An Ohio Supreme Court justice who's mulling a run for governor thinks it's time for the state to decriminalize marijuana. Justice William O'Neill, the lone Democrat holding an Ohio statewide office, said making marijuana legal is working in Colorado, and doing it in Ohio would bring hundreds of millions of dollars in sales taxes. O'Neill announced earlier this year that he's considering stepping down and making a run for governor, but he doesn't plan on making a decision until the end of the year. In a speech mixed with his analysis of last year's presidential election and thoughts about problems facing the state, O'Neill said he not only wants to legalize marijuana, but also to release all nonviolent marijuana offenders from prison. Denver's Mayor Michael Hancock's administration banned the organizer of this year's 420 rally from hosting the event for 3 years, citing a series of violations at the marijuana celebration. The city outlined 5 concerns in its 11-page letter to the 420 event organizers, enough to trigger the 3-year ban for future event permits. The violations of the city's public event policy included 4 noise complaints, untimely trash removal, limited security guards, unlicensed food vendors, and street closures. Police incidents included the arrests of 2 individuals after at least 1 shot was heard a block away from Civic Center Park, 5 arrests at the event, civil citations given to 20 people, and a report at 10:45 p.m. of a man threatening the post-event cleanup crew. Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper stopped in Cortez Sunday to sign a bill protecting hemp farmers who use water stored in federal reservoirs. Colorado legalized growing hemp in 2014, but it is still banned at the federal level, creating complications when water from a federal project is used to water it. Senate Bill 117 says Colorado water right holders have the right to use it on hemp if the person is registered by the state to grow hemp for commercial or research purposes. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Monday, May 22nd, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Celebrity Marijuana Zone with Steve Bloom from celebstoner.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Welcome to Cannabis Medicine Today. For over 90 years, cannabis was listed in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia as medicine. Since California became the first state to restore cannabis as medicine in 1996, almost every U.S. state now recognizes some form of cannabis as medicine. But since 1971, the federal government has steadfastly denied the medicinal benefits of herbal cannabis. Join us now as we take a look at the state of cannabis medicine today.
This weekend at the Sullivan Center in Anchorage, Alaska, I moderated the presentations in the seminar tent for the Cannabis Classic Expo and Industry Awards. Speaking on Sunday was Karen Hendrickson, a pesticide program coordinator with Alaska's Division of Environmental Health, on the federal regulations concerning the use of pesticides on cannabis crops.
All right, so the first thing I'm thinking about is it safe? And that's really the bottom line, right? That should be the most important thing. The second thing, because I'm a regulator, we're going to talk a little bit about which pesticides are legal and how you figure that out. But I'm saving that for last because it's really the least important part. Okay, so is it safe? Pesticides are designed to kill things. They're dangerous. Some things are more dangerous than others, but we want to make sure that we're not doing damage to people with the chemicals we're using, or yourselves, or the people working for you. Okay, first thing we don't know. There's a bunch of stuff we don't know when it comes to pesticides and marijuana. The first thing is, if there's residue on the plant and you burn it, how does that pesticide change? Does it undergo some chemical changes? We don't know. How come we don't know? There's only really one other crop that's burned, and it's tobacco, right? Does anybody care if there's a little pesticide on tobacco? There's 20 other things in cigarettes that can kill you. Nobody's studying what happens to pesticides on tobacco. So we don't really know very much about pesticides. There's not a lot of study done on what happens to pesticides when they burn. So now we're breathing them into our lungs. For example, Eagle 20, it's a very common fungicide, very commonly used. It turns into hydrogen cyanide when you burn it. That is not something you want to inhale into your lungs. Okay, so some things that we think it's commonly used on other plants, we can use it here, probably don't want to. All right, the other thing is, not only is it safe to inhale when it's burned, but is it just safe to inhale pesticides? There's not a lot of crops that are grown out there where people are inhaling these things into their lungs. Your lungs absorb things directly in your bloodstream. When let's say you eat some broccoli with some pesticide left on it, it goes through your digestive system, and it's absorbed slowly, it gets filtered through your liver and your kidneys. When things go into your lungs, they go directly, bam, right into your bloodstream, right into your system. So it's a lot faster absorption. It's an exposure route that's more risky. So we don't know that much about how pesticides are absorbed when they come in through the lung system. So that's another thing we don't know about. And it's hard to know, which things are safe because there's not a lot of science to back up our decisions. And contrary to a lot of, decisions being made lately, science is really how we want to make our choices when it comes to using chemicals. Okay, we don't know how much pesticide residue stays on marijuana. There's a whole lot of things that go into how much pesticide residue is still on a plant, from how much sun or photo decomposition is going on, the humidity, the soil, the organic matter in the soil, the plant itself, how much is absorbed, how quickly it processes. These things are studied in detail on every other crop. We don't have that science on marijuana, so we can spray something on corn and know how much is going to be on corn 20 days later. We don't have that data for marijuana. We don't know. So most crops have a pre-harvest interval for each pesticide. And so here's an example of a label, and this product is for corn, a lot of other things too, but for the corn, it says, do not apply within 30 days of harvest for forage grain and stover, whatever kind of corn stover is. But now if you're doing ears of corn and forage type corn, it's 14 days. They've done enough study and gotten enough data to know that you need 30 days to process one type of corn and 40 days for the marijuana residue to abate on another kind of corn. They know these things for all the other crops. We don't know these things on marijuana. We don't have the data. And anybody who has questions, jump in, because I will just keep going. Okay, if we're concentrating down oils, some pesticides might dissipate through that process. Some pesticides might actually get concentrated along with the oil. So instead of having just 1 part per billion, if you concentrate things down, now you might have 100 parts per billion. That's a concern because we don't really know what happens when you concentrate down in oils. Okay, another thing we don't know is most plants are not grown for medicinal purposes, and in a lot of cases we're using marijuana for medical uses. We don't know if people are, more susceptible if they're dealing with cancer or they're dealing with other issues. So that's something else that we have to think about when we're thinking about what's a safe pesticide. We don't know. So we can look at tobacco. Tobacco gets smoked, but tobacco, like I said, has all these other things that are really hazardous to health. There aren't a lot of studies on tobacco and pesticides.
So are they using pesticides on tobacco and not telling people?
Oh, they're using tons of pesticides on tobacco.
They are, 'cause they can.
Pretty much every crop in the U.S., unless it's organic, tons of pesticides. And even the organic crops, there's a lot of organic approved pesticides. So Yeah, tobacco probably has a lot of pesticides on it, but nobody's studying that. Okay, there are some other kinds of plants that are distilled down, like mint or citrus oils. You get some of those essential oils, but they're not studied the same way. And bottom line is, marijuana is not the same as tobacco. It's not the same as mint. It's not the same, and we don't have the data, so we don't know what's safe. And that's why everywhere you look at Colorado, they have these complicated, guidelines for which pesticides can be used. You go to Washington, Oregon, same thing. I mean, all of us in the regulatory community are going through the same thing here. It's like, how can we tell people what to use when we don't actually have the data to know what's safe? So that's a big, huge problem. We don't know what's safe, so I'm just going to go back through it. We don't know if it changes the pesticide composition when it burns. We don't know if it's safe to inhale and get absorbed through the lungs. We don't know how much pesticide stays on the plant compared to other plants. We don't know what happens when we concentrate things down into oils. We don't know how much pesticide is safe for medical patients. So basically what I'm saying is just be really careful what you put on your plants. And we could talk about what things, some guidelines to look at, but the bottom line is you got to be careful because we just don't know what's safe. All right, questions about that aspect of things, because then I'm going to get into the legal parts of it.
Like when food gets sprayed out with pesticides, like our system can filter, right? We have a kidney, we have, but like when you're smoking, it's going directly into your bloodstream.
Right, so he's talking about, pesticides on foods and how our body absorbs it, and it's filtered through your kidney and liver. Yeah, and it's true. Your lungs absorb things so much more quickly directly into your bloodstream. We don't have studies to show how pesticides act when they're absorbed through bloodstreams. So that's a big safety concern. And one other thing you missed when I showed a picture of Eagle 20, which is a fungicide a lot of people use, and it turns into hydrogen sulfide when it's burned. So pesticides, hydrogen cyanide. Sorry, yes, not hydrogen sulfide. Yeah. Pesticides are designed to kill things.
So then why are we saying we don't know when we can?
Well, we have a lot of studies and data on things like how long it takes the pesticide residue to dissipate from other crops. We don't have that study on marijuana. We have a lot of studies on the health effects at different levels for other crops. We just don't have it for marijuana. They don't study it on tobacco much. There's a lot of lobbying there, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of money. Yeah. Okay, so we basically established that we don't know what's safe. We don't have data. So let's talk about what's legal. And you guys are all really familiar with, the federal versus the state, and it makes things complicated for us. So then the EPA is in a really interesting position. EPA approves pesticides. They do the studies, they figure out what's the safe levels, and they're a federal agency, but they can't approve anything for a product that's illegal federally, but it's being grown in all these states. So EPA is in a strange position. I was just in Portland, and we toured a really nice grow facility as part of our pesticides regulatory work. The EPA folks couldn't go with us. All the state folks could go, but because it's illegal federally, the EPA folks had to pretend like they didn't know what was going on. So they're in a strange position, trying to advise us on how we can figure out how to do this. Okay, bottom line, federal law is the label is the law. You've all heard that term? The label is the law. If it says it on the pesticide label, that is federal law. It's also state law. It's something if if it says apply 10 gallons and you apply 100 gallons, I'm going to be the one that comes and says, what were you thinking? You broke the law. Okay? You have to follow the label. So there's no labels that say, go ahead and put this on marijuana. Not a one. You won't find it, not as long as it's federally illegal. Okay, so we have to look at this, how specific the labels are. Question? No? Okay. So if a product says you can only apply it to wheat, that's it, wheat. That's all you get to apply it to. If a product says you can apply it to cereal grains, you can apply it to wheat, barley, oats, a whole bunch. Because pesticides are approved at the federal level. So you will never see the word marijuana on a pesticide label. And we cannot approve something that violates federal law. But I'm telling you, there is some language flexibility. So here's where I'm getting into here. If it says wheat, only wheat. If it says cereal grains, you've got a lot of options, okay? If the label says you can only apply it to greenhouse tomatoes, just tomatoes. But if it says greenhouse plants, you're in, okay? I don't think hemp is going to be on a label either, because I don't think hemp cultivation is legal. Well, I'm not going to argue with you there, but when it comes to what you're going to find on a pesticide label and you can't violate the label, don't use a product that says only put it on tomatoes. Use a product that says put it on greenhouse plants. Then you're not violating federal law. Okay, so we're just talking about the regulatory stuff here, and I realize it doesn't make a lot of sense. But this is what we're dealing with, so this is the information you need to know to not break federal law.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. Subscribe now for free at mjagenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the pharmaceutical agenda, without all the side effects, overdose deaths, insurance.
Side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and constipation. Dry mouth, constipation, indigestion, and abdominal pain,
which can occur without warning and may cause death.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Cannabis Minority Report from the Minority Cannabis Business Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Activism begins with ACT. The Marijuana Agenda features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Today in the Activist Agenda, we go back to a couple of days ago at the Cannabis Classic here in Anchorage, Alaska. It took place at the Sullivan Arena, the parking lot outside, and Saturday was a gorgeous sunny day. Sunday was a little more like Portland, kind of dark and rainy. But across from the seminar tent was the Dab Stars booth. They won the best booth at the event, and no doubt because our good friend Jonah Tacoma was running the show there from Dab Stars, and he's always a crowd pleaser. He helped lead us in an epic 420 celebration that took place on Saturday. We've got the video from it right now.
All right, tighten up, let's go! All right, let's do it!
Yeah, as soon as he started going to my, I was like, oh, what the hell?
When they say you can't do an event, there's no event. So we work hard to keep it within the confines of the rules, but we also have a good time, right? Yeah! Okay, so let's do this shit. Okay, so we do have a little bit of time here. All right, Dave, I think you got nominated to start that one. So these big old logs are from Ryan. All right, so Mama here is the one that said she would pay the $400 for the cigar and still smoke it with you guys. So. All right, who wants to like this? You know, we have to have some girl power in here. So look, this was not a possibility a few years ago. This is the reality that you guys have created. And this is the future of cannabis as long as you stay in control of it. So continue to vote, continue to make sure they don't fuck you out of your rights. Because in a year they have a chance to take this back from you. But if you show them the value of cannabis, and you show them that you guys are a vocal majority and not a minority, then they can't take shit from you, right? Yeah. Well, much love to Alaska cannabis.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Pass it around. I'll get it in there. Let's try it. All right, you guys want to open this expensive fucking thing, right? We've been watching these on the internet. Dave, come here. I actually did such a bad job opening this on our live show that they put on a video on how to open it, and I still don't remember how you do it. So I'm gonna massacre the shit out of it.
I think they carry like a district.
Oh, I'm sure I'm doing this the wrong way, and then so many people are recording it, they're gonna be so pissed.
Dave Nyberg told me.
Oh, time out, time out.
Oh, he's got a knife!
Look
He's
at
a man of knife. Welcome to Alaska,
Welcome to
Jonah.
Alaska. That is actually a Spanish pocket sword.
Put that in your check bag. Do not try to take that home in your carry-on.
Oh, we opened the end of it, but that'll be all right. We're supposed to cut that off anyway.
Just made it easier.
Oh yeah, please do.
Oh, look at that thing.
Yes,
Stick your nub in there. All right. So, I personally don't believe a cigar should cost $400, but there are $400 cigars out there. So, thanks to your community, you're gonna get to smoke one. Security literally went, okay.
They're happy that we're out here.
Right.
They love
We
us.
acknowledge them, they acknowledge us, we're good to go, I think. All right, you gotta puff that up.
Alaska's
It takes a
nothing
bit
but
to really get
respect,
her
man.
steam rolling. You feel like a boss? Right? Look, cannabis represents social mobility to a lot of you guys. Because in America, you're pretty much born with the amount of money that you're going to have in your life. We have a system where rich people own everything. And it's because their grandparents passed that shit on to them. So cannabis is yours to pass on to your kids. But you don't take advantage of that shit, you miss out. So this is your time. Alaska is a perfect example of a community that's just getting together. There's what, 2 concentrate companies, right? So get out there and do your thing. She looks so excited.
Yeah, she's ready.
Jessica, where's my camera?
Oh my God.
Thank you for coming, Mama.
All right, Mr. Nyberg.
Look, you guys made her cry. That's a community, right? You see a lot of different colors, shapes, and sizes out here, and that's the reality, is that we cross all boundaries. And cannabis means so many things to so many people. And even you guys that feel like you have nothing wrong with you, you're treating stress, you're treating insomnia, you're treating all the fucked up shit of just dealing with life, and you're not using pills. Do that at home when you're all fucked up tonight. Wow, that's lovely. Great taste to it. Oh, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Brandon, what up? Hey! Oh, can we get a group photo, yes? Yeah! All right, Jessica here's the official Dab Star photographer, so we're all going to tighten up.
Yeah, Dab Star.
Charlie Danforth just What's up, Radical Road?
Hey! A great time with Jonah Tacoma and all the folks there from Dab Stars as we counted down 420 here in Anchorage, Alaska on a beautiful day for the Cannabis Classic. Stay tuned because coming up in hour 2, we've got live guests right here in Anchorage to talk about the Cannabis Classic. Presenters and winners will be right here live for all of hour 2. But coming up next, our Northeast Cannabis Chronicle. Eli Harrington joins us talking about Vermont legalization when we return. Inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
The Marijuana Agenda. Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaman Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dogs.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine from the Burning Issues podcast on CannabisRadio.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Welcome to the Northeast Cannabis Chronicle. Today we catch you up on the latest news and speak with an expert from the Northeast region of the United States, from New England to the Mid-Atlantic, including the evolution of consumer cannabis in Massachusetts and Maine. Now, let's return to the birthplace of our nation in this edition of the Northeast Cannabis Chronicle.
Welcome to the Northeast Cannabis Chronicle. I'm Russ Belville. Joining us today is another fine podcaster from the Northeast. We've got Eli Harrington joining us. Eli, welcome to the show.
Hey, Russ. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor. Big fan of your work. All frequent listener.
Oh, thank you very much. Let's tell our listeners a little bit about your podcast if they're interested in getting into much more fine detail about what's going on in the state of Vermont.
Yeah, totally. Well, like everything else with Vermont cannabis, things are evolving quickly. And I started Vermontawana as a podcast, I think about 6 or 8 months ago. I was interested in the format. I was doing some writing on a blog called Vermontawana, and I've actually co-founded a site called Heady Vermont, Heady, with my partner Monica. So the podcast has been a really fun way to engage with folks. As a former video guy, you don't always have time to do video, especially when you're starting up and bootstrapping. So, yeah, the Vermontawana podcast, it's on iTunes. We're on SoundCloud. We talk to people who are here in Vermont, whether they're politicians. We talk to other folks around the industry. We were just at NECANN not too long ago talking with Mark Shepard and those kinds of guys. So, and we're rapidly expanding. So, Vermont as a cannabis market is a place that's kind of just waking up to everything that folks like you guys have been doing for years out west. So there's a lot of information to share, a lot of cool products to talk about, a lot of businesses and organizations that we want to promote. So it's a great place to be, and we're happy to be the first and so far only cannabis media outlets who are talking about this with the perspective of compassionate, informed locals who are certainly not out there for the money. So shout out to any of the sponsors out there in New England too.
Well, that's fantastic. And Vermont, we've got our eyes on Vermont because you guys are poised to become the first state to pass adult cannabis use legalization without having to go through the initiative process like we had to in the first 8 states. Tell us your feelings about how that has proceeded through the legislature, because I know they had to make some compromises that we weren't too happy with.
Well, that's exactly it, and I think to step back, I think there are I think Keith Straub just wrote there are 26 states that do not have ballot initiatives, right? So the Vermont Constitution, the only way something becomes law is through the legislature, right? So there are no binding referendums. And what that does, if you think about cannabis movements around the country, typically, you'll have 1 or 2 or 3 different groups that'll organize. Ideally, they come together, but there's kind of a clear tent. There's a yes, there's a pro, and there's a no. Without having that referendum process, people have to make a lot more decisions about which aspects of laws they will and will not support. And I think that's something that we learned last year going through the process where we had a regulate bill that, people described as corporate, and it did not allow for homegrown. So you had last year in 2016 a governor who wanted it to happen, but advocates, it was hard to organize, and, cannabis folks are naturally independent. It was hard to get people to find those compromises, and ultimately, because that home cultivation and legalization and criminal justice aspect wasn't included, we had a lot of folks who, were huge proponents and had been in the trenches for decades. Folks like Fran from Vermont Homegrown, who I know has been on the show, who had to say, draw a line. And so in some cases like Ohio, you'll have places where there are referendums and people say, this is just too bad, I can't support it, it's not progress at all. In places like Maine, you'll have compromises where, there will be fractures, but people will come together and kind of suck it up. But for the rest of us, it really is issue by issue, because you have to you have to do a lot of political calculation. And at the end of the day, you not only have to convince the voters that it's okay, but, you have to convince the elected officials. And most of them don't know much about cannabis, don't necessarily want to know much about cannabis. So it's been an interesting process up here in Vermont. And I would say the biggest lesson that we can take out of this, and the one that's really important to share with folks, is really building those coalitions, and building real coalitions and having people who will go out there as individuals who are leaders in those communities and talk to other, growers, or talk to other media folks, or talk to other, online activists and say, this is why this compromise can or cannot work. Here's why it will or will not work. And to actually have people who understand the politics and say, well, listen, we're not going to get 6 plants here in Vermont this year. I think that the toughest compromise was waiting an extra year for legalization, but we came close to being in a spot where you had people who were generally favorable to reform saying, I want regulation, but I'm not interested in legalization. And other folks saying, I want the criminal justice reform, but I don't want the regulation. So I got to say, I think the strategy of separating the issues early in the year was really a good one. Take legalization as one issue, take regulation as one issue. And then the compromise that happened at the end of the year was even more impressive, because it really is, it is something that I think everybody can live with, and still, like you said, is a historic step forward. I mean, convince, 180 people, the majority of whom are senior citizens, when you're talking, when the people on the other side of the table are teachers and cops, that's really tough to do. So we're just lucky there have been a lot of grassroots advocates here in Vermont and around the country, who are giving us the evidence, who are sharing the facts, who are pointing to the sky not falling. And, again, if it weren't for the OG activists and people who have sacrificed so much, we wouldn't be able to do this, and I couldn't get on Twitter and put facts out there that you share.
Yeah, and it's just interesting to me how, as legislatures now are tackling this issue, you've got Vermont moving forward with allowing home grow but not pot shops. You got New Jersey moving forward with allowing pot shops but no home grow. It's really weird how this shakes out. And the latest step, of course, is now that the legislature has passed this, it's sitting or making its way to the desk of Governor Phil Scott, the Republican in Vermont. And he seems a little reticent to want to sign this, and he cites highway safety. I looked up the figures. It seems like Vermont's a pretty safe place to drive, and you guys have been smoking a lot of pot for quite a while. So what's going on there with the governor?
You know, it's a safe place to do a lot of things. You know, another interesting stat about Vermont, we think of it as being this hippie liberal place. Vermont, there's almost no gun control. You know, we have some of the loosest gun laws in the country, but we also barely have any gun violence. So I think people can come to terms with this idea. You know, Governor Scott, he's somebody who's been fairly moderate. You know, he's somebody who's been more practical and kind of get along. Not coming from the legislature, he's not kind of a deal maker. But, you know, we're lucky here in this state where we have our lieutenant governor, David Zuckerman. This guy has been advocating publicly and running on the issue since the 90s. Worked for Bernie, organic farmer with a ponytail, right? We have him as our lieutenant governor and Phil Scott as our Republican governor. So, you know, I think it kind of shows you that I think Vermonters in general are more issue conscious than party conscious. And that's something that's really benefited us. So, you know, if we're handicapping it, I go back in history and I think about 2004 when S76, our medical marijuana law, passed, which again, that was a way more difficult battle. With people having to do so much. I mean, you know, Mark Tucci is the guy who inspired me, one of the original Vermont patients here. At that point in time, we had Governor Jim Douglas, who was way more conservative. He's getting calls from the Bush White House telling him to veto this thing. And ultimately he says, I'm not going to support this. I oppose it. I don't like marijuana. I don't think medical marijuana should happen, but I'm going to respect the will of the legislature and the will of the people. So I think ultimately things are being drawn out here quite a bit in Vermont, but I really think that ultimately that's where we're going to get to, where the governor can say, listen, I don't support this, you know, keep all his friends in law enforcement happy. Say, I don't support this, I don't endorse this, but the process has happened, you know, all this time and energy has been spent to pass this bill, and I'm not going to stand in the way of that.
Yeah, we hope that is the outcome for the state of Vermont. And it's very interesting to me, too, how you went from having a previous governor, Pete Shumlin, who was quite supportive of the issue, to this Republican governor, Phil Scott. And like you mentioned, Vermont seems to be more issue than party. I mean, you're the state that gave us Bernie Sanders and Pat Leahy, for God's sake. And
damn right.
So is it safe to say, though, that a Vermont Republican might be a different sort of animal than your typical, say, Texas or Alabama Republican?
Well, that is certainly safe to say, and I think we're very proud of that. You know, I mean, traditionally, there were 100 years. It took 100 years for Vermont to get a Republican or a Democratic governor here. You know, I mean, the party is what's changed. From 1860 to, you know, Phil Hoff in, I think, 1960 or 64, it was only Republicans. And they used to have the East-West rule where there was a Republican in the Senate from the east side of the state and then one from the west side of the state. So, you know, it's a place where I think it's really more libertarian. Vermont is a live and let live kind of place. You know, we don't tell you who to love. We don't tell you what to do in your house. We don't make you register your weapons. But, you know, if you got to get pulled out of the ditch or get your driveway shoveled out, we're going to help you. And I think ultimately it's that kind of coming together. And you got to remember, Vermont's a tiny place population-wise. So, you know, I think kind of community-level discussions really matter more here. And you have people who are willing to step outside of a party orthodoxy and look at the issue. I mean, we have one of the senators, Joe Benning. He's a Republican from the Northeast Kingdom. You know, this is a guy who became a lawyer because he got a BS pot bust when he was in high school in New Jersey in the 70s. You know, so he's somebody who's up in the reddest part of the state as a registered Republican and saying, look, here's a common sense thing I know from experience. So I think we're really lucky because being such a small state, having a really accessible democracy, you get to hear more of those stories. And our legislators are people we run into all the time. You know, they're people that we know. They're coaches and teachers and farmers and all that good stuff. So, you know, they're listening. And I think they really deserve credit because a lot of them were not ready to go along with us and not want to talk about this, you know, and we're really nervous, especially a lot of moderate Democrats. You know, I mean, a lot of folks who are getting pressure from their school boards, they have Democrat next to their name and they're in Chittenden County. You know, right in Burlington, one of the most liberal places in the country. So I do think we are very, very fortunate. And I think that, again, it's a credit to grassroots lobbying efforts. And it's people getting out there, making phone calls, showing up, putting stuff on Facebook. It's not just buying advertising and making TV ads and slogans. You need that stuff too. And we've had, a lot of great help from the national partners. I mean, MPP's been in here for the last few years, very active. But, really at the end of the day, it's people stepping up and being able to say publicly, I support this. This is common sense. Let's turn the page for a better Vermont. So I got to give our representatives credit for listening, because a lot of them came a long way in the course of 1, 2 years, 6 months, 1 month in the case of some of them, who we had to convince. And ultimately, that's why the bill ended up being, less than a lot of people would have liked and slower than a lot of people would have liked. But, I think appreciating that effort is really important, recognizing that. So, it all starts from the grassroots and from people who listen to this show, who are inspired, who are informed, who are passionate, who care about their communities. It's making those phone calls. It's getting their friends to do it. Social media and Twitter are free. These are a lot of tools. There are a lot more tools out there that don't cost money and cost time. So I think it's really encouraging from, like you said, the state that gave us Bernie. Grassroots politics, common sense, and people getting involved can make an impact on any issue. And we're really happy that we've made this big step forward, and fingers are crossed, and we're knocking on wood that our governor doesn't commit political suicide and derail this.
Let's hope so. Well, Eli Harrington, we appreciate you coming on the Marijuana Agenda to fill us in on some of the details that are happening there in Vermont. Please give our listeners the links back to your show if they want to check out more.
Yeah, definitely. So you can find, if you want to know everything that's going on in Vermont, check out headyvermont.com. We put a ton of stuff out there all week. It's original content written by us. We're out there. I'm doing this full time. And the Vermontajuana podcast. It's Vermont, Vermontijuana, Vermontajuana. The podcast, it's on SoundCloud and it's on iTunes. And we are going to have a fun episode coming up soon. But if people want to get a little bit more info on the political calculations behind the scene, we just talked about that in a recent episode, and have some really good stuff coming up, and including hopefully what's next with a post-signed bill.
All right. Well, Eli, thanks for joining us again, and good luck with everything going on there in Vermont.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. Subscribe now for free at mjagenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
It's time for cannabis facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cannabis Sports Medicine from the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I inhaled.
That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
Well, nothing gets my Facebook page roiling these days like stating the simple fact that cannabidiol is a Schedule I controlled substance under federal law and illegal under most state laws. But our CBD oil is produced from hemp, so it is legal in all 50 states, comes the inevitable reply, sometimes with colorful language expressing the commenter's opinion of my intellect. I've run down the legalese before. I've shown readers in plain language how cannabidiol and all cannabinoids derived from the resins of cannabis plants are quite clearly considered illegal drugs by the DEA. But our CBD oil is extracted from the stalks of hemp plants, so it's legal in all 50 states. I've run down the botany before. I've shown readers the scientific studies declaring that nothing but trace amounts of cannabinoids are found in the stalk, and most of that is found in resin sticking to the stalk, and anything that comes from resin is illegal. But maybe all the legal and scientific jargon are just too much to wade through. So let's just apply some common sense, people. If CBD from hemp were already legal in all 50 states, why did 16 states go through the trouble of passing CBD oil laws for epileptic kids? If CBD from hemp were already legal federally, then why are there 3 separate bills proposed in the federal Congress right now to remove CBD from the Controlled Substances Act? Now look, I don't care if you want to buy some CBD oil on the internet from someone who's charging you an arm and leg for it. And I don't care if companies want to sell you that CBD oil in defiance of prohibition. I do care, though, when for-profit companies falsely entice their customers into breaking laws without their informed consent. Real people are being busted for this allegedly legal in all 50 states cannabidiol oil, facing real consequences when they and their families were completely unaware of them, thanks to this nonstop proselytizing for profit of the false gospel of legal hemp CBD. The owner of Tobacco Depot stores in Alexander and Watford City is now facing up to 40 years in prison, reads the first line of a story in Bismarck, North Dakota, Wednesday. The owner says he's spoken to all of the companies that sold him the products tested, and they were all outraged over the process and have told him the products were legal for sale, and they will help him in the legal process. Well, it's hard to blame that guy. Just 2 weeks earlier, Bismarck's news station proclaimed that CBD oil is, quote, sold in all 50 states and has some of the same effects as medical marijuana, and, quote, anyone can use it, end quote. They even interviewed another store owner who explained that the CBD oil, quote, is from the hemp plant. That makes it legal for us to sell it, end quote. Another story. A Fredericksburg man was arrested last night after the Kerrville Narcotics Unit raided his family home looking for cannabis oil. This was a story in Texas from last September. The man and his wife operate an online natural health store selling hemp-based CBD oil. And who could blame them? As the Texas media reported it, quote, according to a recent press release put out by the Texas Hemp Industries Association, cannabidiol derived from a legal industrial hemp plant is an essential oil like lavender or peppermint and is not subject to the regulation established by the Texas Compassionate Use Act, end quote. Here's a story from Illinois just last Thursday. A drug task force raided a downtown Edwardsville shop suspected of selling cannabis oils. Officers reported purchasing cannabidiol edibles and oil. Nobody's been charged yet, but Police found 63 containers of products, such as Relax CBD syrup, which suggests if they're an ounce apiece, they could be facing a 3-year mandatory minimum sentence in state prison. Even in the states where cultivation and use of marijuana, chock full of CBD and THC, is legal for all adults, you can still get busted over CBD oil if you cross state borders with it or fail to adhere to state regulations on it. In my home state of Oregon, a Brookings man this month allegedly tried to ship marijuana products to his sister in California who is battling cancer. Police seized the shipment, which the man protested because CBDs and terpenes are legal in all 50 states. The same goes for Taunton, Massachusetts, where 2 detectives came in late Tuesday morning to inform a convenience store owner it's still not legal to sell ingestible products containing either the intoxicating element THC or cannabidiol, also known as CBD. Even where I'm talking to you right now, right here in Alaska, enforcement officers seized items from several stores in the state that contained cannabidiol oil. This was in Wasilla back in February. Now, maybe the companies and associations shilling for the legal hemp oil fantasy will devote serious money and legal resources to defend all these families who believed their mistaken legal interpretation. It'd be great if they won, but they won't because the law is clear. I think prohibition of cannabis in all forms is unconstitutional under the 9th Amendment, but I'm not going to sell you some marijuana products in Idaho or Kansas at highly inflated prices and tell you it's legal in all 50 states because I have some novel legal theory. Don't fool yourself into believing your CBD dealer's promises.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
All right, folks, that's all the time we got for Hour 1. Just stay tuned. Hour 2 is next. We're live from Anchorage with a special roundtable of Alaska's cannabis community. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Oh, really? What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule 1 drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
Hey. Welcome back, everybody. Time for Toker Talk Radio, and we're coming to you live from Anchorage, Alaska. And we've got guests in the studio here, such as it is. It's not really a studio. It's just an Airbnb, but we're hanging out here, and we're going to call it a studio. Go ahead and grab this mic like I am, because you got to get it all nice and close. And tell folks who you are.
Hi, this is Liz Doobie with 907 Live.
This is Johnny Gray.
Johnny Gray and Liz Doobie.
Liz Doobie, that's my birth name. I was born.
Wait, get the mic right close to Liz.
Meant to be a stoner. Liz Doobie.
Liz Doobie.
D-U-B-B-E. I was born with the name, and I've been smoking weed since I was 9 years old.
This is great. So it's not a pseudonym. A lot of people I meet, they go by a nickname.
No, it's not a pseudonym. It's actually my given name. I was born with it, and I've been trying to live up to it for the last 51 years almost.
All right, Mr. Gray. And you are?
Yeah, I'm Johnny Gray.
Gray.
Yeah, a local Alaskan here. I'm Liz's son. I help out with 907 Live and do some of the producing and back stuff and technical stuff.
And so 907 Live is another podcast?
Yes, we have a little podcast that developed, and we're just trying to help build the cannabis community up here and dispensaries that open. When there's events, we volunteer with a program called CannaCare, where we take care of the veterans.
Mm-hmm.
We serve about 50 veterans every month with an event we put together. Local growers, local food people, you name it, we bring together supplies and goodies and grow equipment. Some of the garden centers donate nutrients, dirt, lights, anything we can to help the veterans out and get them their stuff for the cannabis and to help them feel better.
Right on. So this weekend we had the Cannabis Classic, and give us your thoughts on this weekend. It was a lot of fun.
Amazing. It was amazing. We hung out with Jonah and Mo and Jesse. For everybody who wasn't there, or if you were following around on Facebook, it was like all over the place. They set up at the Sullivan Arena, the big arena we have up here in Alaska, in the parking lot. And we were seshing outdoors. There were clouds of smoke. There was dab stations everywhere where everybody was going around. There was some security standing around, but it was like totally safe and comfortable feeling. Food trucks. There was a lot of information. You did there were teaching. We learned about all kinds of different things.
Those panels were good. And how about you, Johnny, and your thoughts about this weekend?
I enjoyed the Cannabis Classic. So we came out to help CannaCare out in a booth, and I learned a lot. We went out. There was a bunch of seminars each day. I tried to sneak around to some of the booths and talk to some of the cool new industry people that are coming up. It was really an awesome place to go for people that are new to the industry, maybe people that are like coming up, designing new cultivation facilities or opening new dispensaries, stuff like that. This was a go out. Corey, I believe his last name is Way.
Yeah, Corey Ray.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to slaughter it there.
No,
so
you got
Corey Ray, he put on this event, and he does a really good job, honestly. Between the seminars and the booths and all the people that come out, we had a really good time. The 420 giveaway that Dab Stars did was really awesome.
That was fun.
A lot of people got to hang around and do a bunch of dabs, I think, and so it was a really good time, I think. I think a lot of people had a good time. I know we did.
So how's the development of Alaska going? I mean, you guys legalized along with us in Oregon in 2014, and we've got in Oregon like 300 shops open. Slow, huh?
In January, you actually kind of started to see some opening going on here in Anchorage, and we were just talking that it's really disappointing. We have the largest population of the state here in Anchorage and the smallest amount being purchased in our dispensaries.
Really?
We have supply issues. They opened us up in an order that for me seemed backwards. You should have had the growers going and all the supply met and all our inspection going on where your testing facilities, everything was set up, and the last thing that would have been opening would have been the dispensaries. And instead you had dispensaries open with no product. Okay, so we the way we did the licensing, the amount of timeline it takes even for like a small little individual grow is months and months, a year or more, and the amount of money it takes for things to get going. So it's been real slow. Supply isn't there. The price is quite high.
What's the price? What am I spending?
$22 a gram.
What?
It's I believe it's for a pen for a pen little refill. It's like $80 to $90 for the little things. For dabs is like I think $80, $90 a gram.
Wow.
The pre-rolls are $15, and I common knowledge is it's trim. It's not. It's leftover stuff that's in the pre-rolls.
I just want to say something.
Yeah.
She's right. The cultivation not coming in for the medical. Oregon, I believe, had a little bit of a medical background before, so we kind of became legal at the same lines. But they had a medical background that was there for, like, I want to say 3 years in the cultivation.
We had our dispensaries officially open in 2013, and then we got on to having regulations and stuff a little bit later. I'll tell you what, let's take a break, and we'll get right back to that subject here as our live discussion in Anchorage, Alaska, on some of the pitfalls of starting up the industry here in the 49th state. I'm Radical Russ. You're listening to Toker Talk Radio on the Marijuana Agenda. We're back right after this.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. Supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
The marijuana agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer.
I'm Russ Belleville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cultivator's Corner with Jorge Cervantes from marijuanagrowing.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a Radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Barack has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Smells like a skunk. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everyone. We are live in Anchorage, Alaska. This weekend, I took part in the Cannabis Classic, and if you look at the scroll on the bottom of the screen, those are the winners of the Cannabis Classic. I got them all listed, except for the best booth. I didn't have that one listed, but it's in there. You can get more information by going to gocannabisclassic.com. I'm also checking out the live chat room we've got available on our YouTube stream. If you got any questions for our Alaska cannabis community experts here, please let us know. Liz and Johnny are here. Liz Doobie and Johnny Gray. And yes, her name really is Liz Doobie. Welcome back, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks for having us.
So we're talking about getting the industry up and running here in the state of Alaska, and it's been moving at a snail's pace. And I think a lot of people in the lower 48 don't recognize the fact that while Oregon and Alaska have a lot in common, we both did medical in '98, we both passed legalization in 2014. But in Alaska, they didn't move forward with their a dispensary system, like a regulated medical system.
No.
And we kind of bootstrapped off our medical system when we went rec. So tell us about that.
Now, see, okay, and I didn't follow it a lot, but from what I understood, they didn't allow cultivation facilities.
Yeah.
It was basically kind of private. If you got a medical card, you kind of grow privately. They didn't allow a real cultivation commercial product to be initiated for people to go to dispensaries if they had medical cards, and it was really it's a hard thing because, like you're saying, until in 2014 when it became recreational legally, no one really looked at cultivation in Alaska. And so I think that it was something that was just overlooked, really, limited. Honestly. It was limited and overlooked.
Here's what I want to say about it.
Yeah.
Because I was actually kind of around back in the day, and you went and paid the doctor, and there were a few people. There was literally you grew it yourself. They didn't have a program. The problem with doing a medical program is if I'm disabled and I'm medically limited, I might not be able to grow for myself, which means I have to have a dispensary to go get it at, or I need a grower to help. In Oregon, my brother has a medical need, and he has a grower that grows and supplies for him, and he gets his weekly supply, and that grower supplies for several different people's medical needs. For us up here, that didn't happen. They literally made it where you could go get a card and you could grow your set amount of plants and have a set amount of possession. And it made that legal to do. That was all our medical was. We had no dispensary program. We had no assigned grower program.
No
caregiver program. So all of that has developed over the last 4 years. Now you can go get the caregiver pat. You can get the licensing. And then it's still one of those, the caregiver had to do everything for free. Mm-hmm. There was no compensation of cost or anything. There's all these things where somebody has to absorb the cost of all of this to make this stuff work.
Sure.
And because we failed at setting up all the pre-stuff that you're talking about. These other states really did. And even without doing that, the order you need to have is the supply needs to be sitting there waiting for when the stores open. If you open a Walmart and there's nothing on the stock, how long is that store going to stay open if there's no supplies on the shelves?
Well, that was what they were saying in a couple of panels with the Levintons from Enlighten and Travis and Keenan from Pakalolo. We're talking about our goal is just to be able to be open for what our listed store hours are.
Yes,
right.
They had to limit hours. Literally, when they opened, there was like Thursday, Friday, Saturday from 3 o'clock until 6 o'clock, and then
3 hours a day.
3 hours, and then it would come up on the Facebook feed that we're out.
Kind of like your nighttime hours around this time of year.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. When the red light's on, we come, and the green light's on. Okay,
right.
And it's really kind of it's been a frustrating thing to. I believe in the legality. I vote. I went and registered to vote when I was 18 years old. I'll be 51 next week. I believe that the purpose of all of this is to make legal consumption for 21 and older. I think the arguments against this, the kids will get it, all of this, the black market people don't care. The people who would go down here, if you're a kid and you want to go get cannabis, you're not going to get it at a shop.
Right.
Okay, so if we want to protect children, we need legal ways to get it. And then this whole thing of making it so difficult to do it legally, whether or not it's a dispensary or let's start talking about on-site consumption. Let's talk about potluck events.
Yes.
Okay, potluck events and the on-site consumption that we're dealing with. You can go. We have a huge industry of people who want to come to Alaska and experience Alaska. They want to come up on the cruise ships. They want to get Matanuska Thunderfuck. They want to get Sensimillas. They want to get all these different types, and they want to be able to consume it. So when they buy it, where are they going to consume it? Where can, unless you go rent a house like this or a B&B or something, where can they legally go and consume? They're going to get a $100 ticket. Well, then they're scared. Let's use fear. Let's scare people into not doing stuff. So, and then there's all this money we're supposed to be making off of this stuff. If we don't have on-site consumption, if you walk in a dispensary and you want to buy it, you should be able to go in this other room like a hookah lounge or like at the bar and sample the wares. Have time to come down enough to legally go out and drive and not be intoxicated where you're not safe. If I can go to an event and smoke a cigarette outside the Soli, if I can go out to an event and go to the beer garden at the fair, why can't I stand at the fair and do this?
I have no good answer for that. We figured out how alcohol works. We figured out how tobacco works. Marijuana is kind of in between the two as far as it changes your mental outlook and it creates a smoke. So why can't we deal with it? We did have a comment from the chat room. They wanted to ask, how'd you get Jared Kushner to come in and smoke a joint with you?
How did I get Jared?
They say you look like Jared Kushner from Trump's son-in-law.
Oh, that's hilarious. I guess that's a compliment.
I don't know if it is. But,
I don't know. He's rich. I wish I had that kind of money.
That'd be nice.
Tag him and get him.
I'll be his, what's that called? His dupe? His doppelganger?
Yeah, doppelganger? Yeah.
There we go. A job in that for me.
So back into Alaska stuff that's different that I learned while I was up here is, number one, the state of Alaska does not have a Department of Agriculture.
No, we do not.
So, which you think about it makes sense, right? Unless you're farming snow, right?
We don't have a lot of land up
right.
there that's farming.
Right.
Anyone who's come to Alaska, it's not like we have fields everywhere.
Right. So right there, as far as dealing with an agricultural product like cannabis, there's not as much institutional understanding as you'd find in a state like Oregon, where at least they've grown hops or something, and you can compare it.
They had and another thing I brought up, me and Corey talked a bunch about was the hops, and there was a huge seminar. And the comparison of how it ended up being that you guys had like a huge jump ahead of us, Oregon did, because you guys had this brewery industry that was there that really set the standard for your cannabis industry to be so great.
Yes.
And we missed out on it.
We're isolated.
That's true. So no Department of Agriculture. And then I found no regulations with regard to pesticide testing on your cannabis.
That's a big hate that everyone's given up here.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think has just been handed to the growers to be kind of trusted And like, if you're a good grower and you're producing good products, we'll just kind of trust.
Who wants to pay more for more testing when we're paying $22 a gram and they're going to charge us more to do more testing? The genetics aren't doing the testing because it's not being required by the state. And in order for the grower to want to do it, it's got to be required. And then somebody has to pay. There's the money game again. And so people like me who maybe pesticides bother end up having to grow my own and don't go buy at the dispensary. And I provide for myself legally at home that way.
There you go.
Yeah, because, I mean, at a certain point, I would love to have the pesticide testing. I think everyone would. We would love to have maybe stable regulations like Oregon did, and then have a block set up that's these are legal, these are not legal, and then then we have an allowance of this is basically okay, this is not okay. Instead of just everyone should know that some sort of pesticide, I think, is used because people lose money in the long run. If I have a $70,000 crop and I get a bug infestation, I can't afford that. It may bankrupt me. I mean, and so at a certain point, I kind of feel for these guys that are growing. I just would like it to be maybe a little more educated, and then maybe some regulations on it, kind of like Oregon did. I think it would be a great thing to have in Alaska. We have the chance to follow in the footsteps of Oregon and Washington and Colorado and all of these great states. And so I think we're just trailing behind just a little bit. We have a great industry up here. Don't get me wrong.
And all sorts of interesting inroads for your industry in that you've got such an amazing tourist influx in this state. People coming into the interior, places like Fairbanks for the wilderness, coming into Ketchikan and Skagway and all these places with the cruise ships and such. I mean, that's got to be, they got to be looking at that. I mean, especially when you talk about the social use aspect.
And, we're fighting for budgets in Alaska. Anyone who's in Alaska knows that we're fighting for money up here. It's a hard thing. And so I think everyone sees the point of view you're giving is we could make some serious money on millions of people that come to Alaska that would enjoy cannabis. Being that there are better regulations on stuff and that we have dispensaries that are open all the time,
real hours, right?
Yeah, we get some real supply going on up here. The thought that came to me as you guys were talking about the pesticides,
I'm gonna have to
you've got to have a break.
I gotta have to have you hold that thought because as we wind up our live coverage here from Anchorage, Alaska, my internal bodily clock is still an hour ahead of where you're at, which means that right now.
420?
Yes.
It's 420.
Hide the dope.
We don't have any dope.
Then what did I just smoke?
All right. That sound means that it's 420 in the Pacific time zone. That means under my union regulations, I'm required to have a mandated safety meeting. And I've got to instruct you guys on safety. So we're going to be safe and we'll be right back after this. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Freedom Leaf Preview with Steve Bloom from Freedom Leaf Magazine. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, you know, because they've got a town called Argosville. Arr. What are you smoking there, boy?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Toker Talk Radio, coming to you live from Anchorage, Alaska, where we just took place in the Cannabis Classic. If you want to learn more about it, go to cannabisclassic.com. Also, coming up later on this week in the show, tomorrow we debut a new segment here on the show, Expanded Mind. We're going to learn all about psychedelics, so tune in for that. Also, another new segment tomorrow, Shark Sessions with The Marijuana Show. Karen and Wendy from The Marijuana Show, and highlights from some of the best of their investor strategy sessions on The Marijuana Show in our new segment, Shark Sessions. Also coming up in the rest of the week, on Wednesday, the Hemp Day, Hump Day Update and the Southeast Cannabis Chronicle. On Thursday, Voice of the Industry with National Cannabis Industry Association, and another brand new segment, Cannabis Sports Medicine, featuring the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition, the NFL players and other athletes who are fighting to get access to medical cannabis for athletes. And then on Friday, we'll finish up with the drug policy reform update and our government at work. But right now, we go back live to our Airbnb here in Anchorage, where we're joined by our guests Liz Doobie and Johnny Gray. Welcome back to the show, guys.
Hey, guys.
Hey. How's it going, guys?
So we've been kind of exploring the differences here in Alaska from what we might know in legal states, medical states in the lower 48. And there's all sorts of interesting differences. And one of them is that, first of all, folks, Alaska's freaking huge. It's 2.3 times bigger than Texas, folks. It's huge. And there's a lot of places in this state. The only way you can get there is an airplane or a seaplane, one of them seaplane kind of things, or a boat. And both of those things are covered under federal transportation laws. So has that been
drive through Canada?
Or drive through Canada?
That's kind of a risky thing. You might want to. That's international travel.
Right.
You got to actually have a passport to travel through Canada, to come up here. So it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So it is. We're very limited up here. Limited on transport. And when they passed and did our rules, what we said was we wanted everything to be in Alaska. We wanted it to be grown in Alaska, processed in Alaska. In order to sell it, it had to be all done in state. And so they don't have in our dispensaries products that are made in Colorado. And I think part of that is because of the federal regulations about even shipping state to state and how could we do it. So you have your beautiful stuff down there, and we wanted to go and we want to have commerce back and forth, and people in Colorado want Alaska weed. Yeah. People in Alaska want Colorado's weed.
Sure.
Well, why can't we ship? Why can't we UPS? Why can't we FedEx? Why can't we legally package and ship securely? We ship blood. We ship hearts. Come on, people. You don't think we can ship some cannabis safely? We ship medication.
Sure.
So that's a limited thing. And when they were looking, part of the reason they wrote the law that way was because they knew shipping into state was going to get us in trouble federally, the feds. So we had to make our rules where our rules were our rules that would make us legal for the feds. And that's why we're not having on-site consumption, because the feds say, we don't want you doing on-site consumption.
Yep.
So, to me, that's the whole part of all of that. Keep pushing it in my face.
They can hear it with the headphones
on. You can hear it.
Not too much, though.
Okay.
Too much. All right, so you were going to say something about the whole issue there?
I got brain fart there. What were we talking about?
The maritime and airlines.
From what I understand, there's been a little bit of a relaxation on interstate travel.
Intrastate?
Yeah, intrastate.
Yeah.
So as long as you're not, because there's when you go into an airport, what I understand, the Cessna airplanes aren't exactly going through federal regulations. I think they are flown federally, maybe under an aviation federal guidelines, but you aren't checking through security to go onto a lot of these flights.
Okay.
Like when I go to fly to the bush, they got like a little left door basically when you go into the airport, and then you go out onto a Cessna and you fly out to wherever you need to go. A lot of people, I believe, are using that route to transport because as long as you have your Alaska marijuana handler's card, you can transport marijuana from a business. And so they're packaging it, safe packaging it, and then transporting it in between. Because there's places like Sitka, like you said, you can't get to unless you boat or fly.
And they transport. There was images going around of a suitcase with 500 joints in it.
Okay.
There are people that are transporting in-state. They are carrying it as checked. There was an article on one of the local news, maybe KTUU, I'm not sure, I'm not trying to name drop, but there is some common knowledge going around about interstate travel going on where from this dispensary, from this grow, and they've got their joints and big bags of them, and they carried it on, and they traveled down to these areas that you're talking about where it's very limited, and they can't really produce for themselves. There's 500, 1,000 people, but they've got a dispensary. How are they providing it? Somebody flew in with 500 joints.
Wow.
Or 5,000 joints. I think it was 5,000. It was one of those carry-ons.
Yeah, full-size
with a couple bags,
carry-on, yeah.
and they were all pre-rolls. And yeah. So it's happening.
Yeah.
We're figuring out ways to do it and not get in trouble. So, but we can't just fly to Seattle and stuff. I mean, Jonah was on the airplane with his blunt, but he could have gotten in trouble.
Yeah.
The way we have things set up, he could have. He didn't, but he could have. We didn't. We stepped out. We smoked openly. It was not a allowed open consumption event. Let's clarify that. This was not allowed open consumption, but we openly consumed.
Yeah.
We took the risk of whether or not we could get a ticket for $100. There were no police. It was a very relaxed environment.
I saw the car once circling the parking lot. That was it.
The event staff that was security was there in case there was violence, which guess what? Other than the Christian religious crazies who were out there threatening people, there was no violence.
Yeah.
There was no problems. We had no medical needs. Not once was there a need for a medical emergency.
Yeah.
It was a very just calm and fun event. And so I don't know why people have so much problem with it.
It is baffling, isn't it? The other thing that is interesting to me about being in Alaska every time I come here is, of course, how long the day is during the summers, and you know, it's only getting dark around 11:30. It's getting light around 4 in the morning, and the opposite, of course, as you get toward winter. So I imagine as a grower up here, it's got to be indoors and, you know, a lot of control.
I think that there's a very small window that outdoor cultivation happens. I don't outdoor cultivate at all.
It's got to be under autoflower. Okay, so anybody who's growing these outdoor, they grow the autoflower where they automatically go to flower. They grow a certain amount of time and then they go into flower because there's no lack of daylight. Or they have a big hoop tent thingy, which you can see online. They do in Oregon and stuff where they limit the light on the outdoor greenhouse sort of thing. The thing I want to say that probably is the more so is it's different environments in the sense of heating a building, cooling a building, the humidity in the air. Okay, so even as a personal little small grower, even in the closet, in the basement, you're having two different environments. We have a summer environment and we have a winter environment. And literally we changed our ductwork. We changed how our stuff is running based on winter or summer. And I'm sure that these big grows have the button switch, but you know, in the wintertime, the humidity is almost gone. It's so dry. The air gets really, really dry and it's super cold.
Sure.
And so you got sweat factor, all these things going on. In the summer, as soon as the spring hit, the bugs come out. The moisture, it starts raining. Suddenly we're the Pacific Northwest and we've got molds coming down the walls and you're sweating and you're trying to figure out where the problems are. Bugs are a horrible factor. If you didn't notice the mosquitoes and the bugs and you hear the buzz and with all this daylight and all the warmth and you can't go around anything without bugs. It's like the common pest, as you guys were talking about, the pesticides. And in my garden outside for my vegetables, I have to use stuff for bugs. I have to use stuff for slugs. And you were saying something about all the stuff I've been smoking for all these years. Everybody has always used nutrients. They've used fertilizers. They've used pesticides. And hopefully you flush for them. Hopefully you're doing it right and you're doing it safely. My tomatoes that I grow and I eat at home, you know, before I consume them, I don't do stuff for a while. I do things to be conscientious of it. And it's part of the name of the game.
Yeah, there is a certain self-correction in the underground market among us chronic cannabis consumers in that we know I've never been more than 2 steps from the grower. Like I was either buying from the grower or from the guy who got it from the grower.
I say no and go. I could go. I have enough of a choice if you've been around for enough years, you have a choice.
Yeah, true.
You know, and if somebody's stuff was sad and they were having problems, you went to another friend,
guy. Yeah.
you know. So
and where we run into the problem as we get this, really, to me, what I find 90% of the problems in dealing with the legalization of marijuana have nothing to do with those of us that are smoking a lot of it. It's the noobs. It's the noob that's like, oh gosh, marijuana's legal again. Oh my. They smoked back in the day, back in Woodstock. They're in their 50s or 60s. Now they grab a pre-roll that's 26% THC and it blows their head off, right? Or they get an edible and they're Maureen Dowd and they're curled up on the couch. And that's where we have the problems and the issues of, you know, packaging and labeling and putting the gummy bears away so the kids don't get into them. We've had this down.
Okay,
for years,
I'm like, that's I'm edibles queen. So during the event,
Yeah.
I was Jonah and everybody, we were all eating my edibles.
Yeah.
I do it at home. I don't have a shop or anything. And I went to the event. We volunteered at CannaCare for the event. We were conscious about it. Everybody knew they were eating an edible. Everybody knew kind of approximate milligrams, you know, of what my strengths were. At home, as a responsible person, I would make infused and not infused.
Mm-hmm.
The infused, I put green food coloring in, and everybody knew if it was green, it was ganj. And if it was regular, it was regular. If there were kids in the house, I always made sure and made regular so that if a kid wanted, they weren't sneaking.
Yeah.
So what happens is you only make gummy bears that are infused, dumbasses. You got 5 kids. Let's get real here, okay? I'm sorry, but I am insulted. I raised 2 sons. My kids never accidentally ate the goodies because I knew that it was important that my kids didn't get exposure to it until they were old enough to do the stuff. They would become responsible adults. I'm heated about this. It bothers me. It bothers me. It's so easy to be a responsible adult and consume responsibly and protect children. And it is easy as making 2 types of cookies.
Mm-hmm.
That's how easy it is. And when the kids want a cookie, they can go over here and they know. And then they're not going to go sneak these over here because they know. They know. And if you've got issue, then don't consume. If you can't be responsible, then don't consume unless your kids aren't around. Or, I mean, there's all kinds of ways. People only have a drink on the weekend or something. You know, people can, if you can't be responsible, then maybe you shouldn't.
There you go. From Liz Doobie herself.
Me, myself.
I love
Take
it.
care of our kids.
And the son here can verify that growing up it was responsible. It was a big deal.
I didn't use until I was older.
Yeah.
I mean, out of college and stuff. And
See, I didn't until I was 22.
Yeah. I was a responsible person. I went to college when I was 17. By the time I was done, I didn't use or drink alcohol until I was of age.
Oh, jealous, man. Because I started alcohol when I was 16.
I experiment. No, I can't say that I did experiment. I tried cigarettes and stuff like that. I was like 12, my first cigarette experience.
Mom, though, not around me.
But I never, it was always like, oh, I'm going to try that. I didn't knew that it was wrong. And then like, I wasn't going to do it again. I never like.
It was a normal, I think, kids exploring.
That's what I was getting at. I think everyone kind of does that little bit of exploring. And then I realized that I needed to grow up and become an adult, I think.
All right, well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we got one more segment here live from Anchorage, Alaska, discussing the ins and outs of marijuana legalization in the 49th state. I'm Radical Russ. We'll be back right after this.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for our Government at Work, the latest in cannabis reform at the local, state, federal, and international level. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Coming to you live from Anchorage, Alaska, where we took part in the Cannabis Classic that took place here, and it was a great time. We had a 2-day event. Saturday and Sunday, noon to 6, outdoors for the first time. And I got to say, when I first heard it was going to be outdoors, I thought, right, outdoors in Alaska. Okay. And here's the thing. I didn't realize it was outdoors until I got here, right? So I hadn't packed like a parka or anything. I had my little thin-ass Anchorage Hard Rock hoodie. So I'm freaking like, oh, it's going to be miserable. Turned out the Saturday was beautiful. Had a nice sunny day, probably hit in the 60s, maybe low 60s. Yeah, and then the Sunday, it was cold and rainy, but it wasn't any worse than Portland in April. So it wasn't much transition for me. I was just fine. But we were talking about the differences here in Alaska with our guest, Liz Doobie on the left and her son, Johnny Gray on the right. And what part were you guys in the Classic? You were working with the Edibles Company, and just tell them a little bit about that.
Canacare, which is the local Canacare. You want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll
Johnny
talk.
Worked the booth.
So we're 907 Live. We do our little podcast. We also help a nonprofit that's called Canacare. They do a veterans nonprofit that basically has sponsors donate all sorts of things from cannabis related products to cannabis itself, and then it's then redistributed out to all of the veterans. We help about 60 veterans a month right now.
Okay.
And so we were there trying to sign up people and introduce veterans. Might be hiding in the community that it's okay, they can come to an event. So we host events monthly. We have people that we help privately.
The project we raised.
Oh yeah, we had a GoFundMe this weekend for a gentleman who had medical issues. He couldn't pay his rent. He was going to be kicked out on the 1st. We said we'll throw together $700 for $600.
But we raised $700.
We raised $700.
That's great.
Yeah, in 2 days for this guy. So the cannabis community came together again. So it's awesome.
Yeah, and let's talk about that community just a little bit here, because I was mentioning earlier how Alaska didn't have the established medical marijuana caregiver, grower, dispensary situation like we had in Oregon. And one of the side effects of that in Oregon is this kind of separation of medical versus rec, where, oh my God, the medical doesn't want rec to do this because it'll hurt medical.
Insult each other.
Yeah, all sorts of things. And also we've got such a, Alaska doesn't have any difference that I could discern between medical and recreational as far as possession and cultivation, or is there?
Okay, the only thing that I think is really different for cultivation is as a medical card, I have to have someone caregive for me or caregive for myself. If I caregive for you, then I lose my rights to my own recreational purpose to cultivation. And then I can only cultivate like a set amount. There's no coalition allowed. So then I'm kind of limping myself trying to help you, but I can only help just you, which doesn't really help. It's less plants in the end.
Plants per person.
And then, like you're saying, the dispensaries aren't offering a discount, I don't think, to medical. As far as I know, I don't think that you're. And like in Oregon, I think you get like 25% off.
It's we have a state 20% tax. The medical is untaxed, and there's lower and higher in different states as well.
I don't think we have that even up here yet.
So what you don't have then is separate competing camps of activists or advocacy groups. You're all kind of in this together, it would feel like.
I think it's a 100%.
What there is.
Yeah, what there is. I think right now we're just breaking about 200 businesses in Alaska, and everything's kind of together, like you're saying. There's not like medical only cultivation. That's not a word up here, I don't think.
Okay. So
the thing I think with that, I want to interject really quick here, is because that's not there, the medical evaluation, like you're looking at and you're talking about medical. So anything medical thinking, like, do you need it for a headache? Okay, so when we're medical and we're talking like you come in and you need types and the strains and types that you need, and we have all this testing going on for that stuff. You need certain types and certain strains for your type. If you've got glaucoma, if you've got migraines, if you've got body pains, okay, you're looking for different needs to be met. If we have no medical program, we have no way of that being monitored or being public advertised. So you walk in and you see there's Cinderella and it has THC of this and CBD of that. Okay. And so you walk in, if you were in any of the dispensaries here, there's kind of a little ad of what we have and what it tested at for what we're testing for. And that's it. It's up to you as a consumer. And that's all it is a recreational consumer. If you have a medical card, you've been able to grow your little medical at home, you know, you have to be self-educated. You go in knowing that I need an indica. I can't do Cinderellas. I can't do hazes. They give me anxiety. They bother me. They give me a headache. So I can't take those. I have to be responsible as a consumer. This is a completely consumer responsible environment right now in a lot of ways. It really has. Because we didn't do any of the work from 98. Yeah. Because it just sat there stagnant. Then we passed the law and then we drug our feet for 18 months. And now all of a sudden, they went around before 420 and shut down everybody. They said they couldn't advertise for 420 events. They took 3 days before. I'm going to bring this up real quick because 3 days before, our AMCO went around, gave letters out to everybody.
Tell them what AMCO is.
AMCO is Alaska Marijuana Control Board, and it's a group, a selected body. And they were appointed and elected, I think appointed. I'm not the pro here. There were people who were supposed to come who know more about this than me. But so they have been interpreting the rules as we voted them. And then they decide what's allowed or not allowed. And they decided that 420 consumption should not be allowed at this place. And they shut down the 420 the third year in a row. 2 years they had open consumption at a club we pay to be a private member of. They told them you have to shut down. They made them close their doors. They went to all of the dispensaries that were having any sort of events and said you can't have a balloon in front because you might attract children. You were giving an example of something that's like if you have a bounce house and you have balloons and you have a clown and you're having fun and you're having some sort of event and you put smiley faces. God forbid you do tie-dye and act like a fucking hippie. And you might, oh my goodness. They came around and they gave all these letters. It's all over on Facebook on all these different people's websites. Okay. They've came around and compensated CBD oil and shut down people with their CBD oils and tested them. We are being treated like criminals. You wonder why we aren't open? Because everybody who is our legislative bodies, our legal people who said they wanted us, who we voted on, are doing everything they can to stop it. They're coming in. They said, the letter said that they had a plan with APD, Anchorage Police Department, in the letters that went out, the letter that shot down potluck events. They had a working plan for how they were going to come in and enforce the disallowment of this, that if you open and you do this, we're going to enforce that we're not allowing this, that you're going and breaking the rules. So we need more. We voted, we had Teresa Collins and Lee Haywood and all of these people were part of this movement. And there was a lot of work to get the legalness happen. And we've got the dispensaries and we got the money coming in a small amount, but a lot of this advocacy is not happening right now. Yeah. It's not there. You didn't see it at the event. You're not. People are kind of on their laurels right now, and we're going to probably lose out if we don't get our shit together.
Well put. Liz Doobie here in Anchorage, Alaska. And I'm glad you mentioned Teresa Collins, who passed away recently, but she was the first Alaska activist I'd ever met. She was a guest on the show a couple of times as well. And
I'm honored to be here and try to continue her fight.
No doubt. And we honored her as well at the awards ceremony that was held at the 420 Potluck Events Center, which is not called 420 Potluck Events anymore.
It's 423rd Avenue, and it's a building that was rented for the event. Yeah. And it's the former, they made them take down any semblance. It's former Potluck Events facility. Even that night, all of us were there knowing and feeling like we were at Potluck Events. Exactly. But they made him take every poster down. Everything was in a room next door. It's a seasonal change is occurring. And if we really want to have on-site consumption at dispensaries, if we want to have a place like Potluck Events, then we have to come together and make it happen. Yeah. As a community, you guys down there in these other areas, you guys have things because people fight. Right. People make it happen. People go stand on street corners like the religious people on there. I mean,
Well,
I didn't see nobody on their knees converting, let me tell you.
Well, I had heard from the guys from Pakalolo on one of the panels talking about when they opened and had their limited hours for the few days they could open, they'd have people out in line like at 4 a.m. in negative 40-degree weather. That's Fahrenheit or Celsius. They're the same at negative 40. That's a little trivia fact, by the way.
Yes,
Nerd.
And about 15 below, your moist boogers freeze around your nostrils. So you can imagine you can't even breathe. It burns your lungs and your nose to breathe. You don't realize until you try to exist in this sort of environment. There's a reason your faces are covered and there's all this frost going on and everything. It's not a nice thing to feel.
So if these people can wait in line at negative 40, can't they get out to a place and testify? Can't they organize a protest? Can't they have a petition? I mean,
you would think. Alaska's a little different in a sense of we're kind of anti-government in a sense. A lot of people come up here, we're rebels. And so I have a history where I worked as a census worker and I've gone around and tried to count and that brings funds in from our government for our roads and for our schools and stuff like that. And people don't like to participate and be invaded and be bothered, and they want their privacy. They came to Alaska because they want to be left alone, and I've got the legal right to do things. And everybody is lazy and doesn't want to stand up. Most people look the other way and don't. Most people don't stop and help somebody. Most people don't take a minute. They just keep driving by.
I heard from a few of the panelists the other day that, here in Alaska, we just act like we're our own country anyway. Like we're our own country.
And if we want what we want and we say what we want, we're going to have to put the proof in the pudding. We're going to have to get behind, and we're going to have to stand up against some of the things that are being done. Yeah. Some of the because it's interpretation we're talking about. We're talking about it was written over here and we all went and voted. Everybody who participated in these votes. And now the body is interpreting things and then going and pointing a finger, sending you a letter and saying this is how I interpreted this.
Yeah, the lawyer Jana Weltzine was talking about how one of the interpretations was of what public was, and that if it was a closed building, a private club, you had to pay a membership for. Even so, the public has access to it, and that makes it public consumption. And she said, well, under that reasoning, a public bathroom is a place that the public has access to. Am I whipping it out and peeing in there? Am I guilty of public urination? An obscenity charge, right? That's it's like suddenly when it's marijuana, oh my God, we can't even let adults do it in a building with each other voluntarily.
Well, and my problem is like, where did it become alcohol was allowed to drink in a bar, but we can't consume marijuana like somewhere legally? Like, you can smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol in a closed environment legally, but we can't smoke marijuana in a closed environment legally. Where did this? I want to know who thought this law up.
You go to the fair though.
Are you like in the alcohol business? Like, literally, I want to know. Like, do you guys have shares in the alcohol business? Because that's what it seems like. It feels like it. It really does. That you guys just want to like keep cigarettes and alcohol going.
Well, that's a lot to digest, and we'll get back to that when we close up shop here. We got one more short segment to go here on Toker Talk Radio. Thanks for joining us live from Anchorage, Alaska. We'll be back in Portland at Delta 9 Studios for tomorrow's show. Make sure you tune in.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
The Marijuana Agenda. Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaolin Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dog.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Marijuana Policy Insider with Marijuana Policy Project. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Hello, Mr. Man. Hi. I'm working. I'm sorry. No food till this is done. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
So I've said this many times on the show before that in every city in America, there exist these buildings. There are these buildings that were constructed with the express purpose of allowing people to consume drugs in them. Now, these drug buildings are usually concentrated in the downtown core, but you can usually find the drug buildings just about anywhere in the town. And these drug buildings, not only are we expecting people to go to these drug buildings and consume their drugs for the purposes of getting high, but we have parking lots at these buildings, right? And we expect the people to drive their cars to the drug building, go inside the drug building, get high on their drugs, and then trust on the honor system that they'll be sober enough to get out after consuming their drugs in the drug building to get in their car and drive themselves home. Of course, if the drug is alcohol, that's the difference. We were just talking about this with our friends from Alaska. We've got Liz Doobie and Johnny Gray about how is it we can smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol in these drug buildings but not consume cannabis.
So what about the we have that facility that's coming into Seattle, I believe, that's the opiate stem cell. The new
the safe injection sites.
Safe injection sites. Wait a minute. Okay, when was the last time any of you guys used heroin? Because I'm pretty sure for hours and hours you're inebriated afterwards. Like not able to. You're gonna let them use a needle and go outside and get in a vehicle and drive away?
Yeah.
That's not cool.
How long we have to stay?
I want to know the regulations on this because. Are you spending the night?
Yeah,
on the Fed's dollars?
That's always my biggest thing when it comes to the marijuana issue is I really didn't get into it so much because of marijuana. Like marijuana, great, whatever. To me, it was more an issue of discrimination. I've often said that like I'm kind of the winner of the privileged decathlon. Yeah. You know, I'm a cisgender, able-bodied, heterosexual, tall, white, American, middle-class, educated male. Like
we're ahead of the curve.
I got the easy settings on the game of life, right? And with that, I'm kind of like Princess and the Pea. Any sort of discrimination is like, how dare you? Don't you see who I am? I'm white man, right?
White. We are white.
Like a superhero, right? So with the marijuana thing, that's where I get pissed off. It's like, wait a minute. How can you tell me the alcohol guy gets all these rights, but the marijuana guy doesn't get these rights?
I want to know where this is written. I want to know because that's where
Here's my question.
Okay.
When you go to the bar,
yes,
do they tell you how long till you can leave? Do they set a timer and you sign in and then you can't leave the building? I mean, I'm serious here. I mean, because Johnny's works security at he's worked the fair and things like that and works the bar at the fair and things.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a funny, you're laughing. But when I walk in and I start consuming, I'm a woman who weighs 130 pounds and I take 3 shots. Let me tell you, I'm going to be legally drunk. Yeah. I better not drive. Johnny could go over here and take 3 shots and he's going to be walking tall and hardly feel it. Mm-hmm. And it's not that he drinks a lot. He's a male, so he processes alcohol about half as fast as I do. And he's way bigger than me. He has a liver that's much larger than mine. So his body is going to do it differently, male and female. All of this is proven. We know cannabis has the same sort of things. But where in our legal system we say you can use this legal drug, okay, do we set the timer when I walk in and not let me go out? So here you go.
Is that what they were doing?
Okay. Do we set a timer?
So as an alcoholic server, you monitor. Like we have what's called like a 1 drink per hour or 1 drink per 2 hour minimum that you would normally watch someone. So a lot of the times, like in a bar situation, the person who's behind the counter can end up in trouble if you end up too intoxicated.
Yeah. They give you way more than 2 shots
an
hour all the time.
Yeah, we're talking here on why when you go to class and you get your tap card, this is what's given. So why not educate a couple pot smokers to stand behind a counter and be like, you don't need 10 dabs.
Yeah.
Here's a dab hit. Here's a bowl or whatever. How hard is it to create a monitoring system? Because the tap card system, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a monitoring system for servers and alcohol security. We monitor people. And that's a legal regulated system. And then it's introduced into a licensing that's a bar over here, and they distribute alcohol. And then the two together kind of coincide. So where's the regulation for marijuana for this? If it's marijuana and alcohol.
And all along the way, taxes are being paid. People are paying. That guy has a business that he's running and he buys, and the feds get their money and their taxes, and the local consumers pay taxes to the local sales, and you buy maybe from the restaurant down the street and all. There's all of this industry that's attached to this. It's not just, it's much bigger than just smoking a joint or consuming or feeling better because it helps me physically or I want to recreationally use. It's a much bigger thing in all our communities.
No doubt about it. Well, I got to say, as we wind things up on the show today, that it's been a fun time coming up here to Alaska for my third.
We've had a blast.
My third time up here, and everybody's been so wonderfully gracious and welcoming. So thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, no, we try to be. I mean, we're the tourist state, I would like to think. So we try to have everyone come up and have a lot of fun.
Johnny Gray, thank you so much. Liz Doobie.
Thank you, Russ, for coming. Can't wait to see you next time.
I'll be back for sure. All right, folks, that's all the time we got for today's show. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to get on a plane, fly back home. We'll be back live from Delta 9 Studios tomorrow. For everyone here at the Marijuana Agenda, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.